Jon Arryn had felt the chill in his bones long before the first snows touched the high peaks of the Vale. Age was creeping up on him, more so than he liked to admit, and he did not welcome the weight of his many years. The Eyrie stood as it always had, a fortress perched so high upon the mountains that the clouds were as close as the courtyard. Yet that day, as he stood on one of the narrow balconies overlooking the steep drop to the Vale below, Jon Arryn felt a different kind of heaviness press upon him. He had come too far to fail now. Too many relied on him to keep stability in a kingdom that he feared was balanced on the edge of a knife. He coughed into the crook of his arm, a throaty, rough sound that echoed back at him from the carved stone walls. The healers told him that he would be well if he simply rested. But there was no rest in the mind of the Hand of the King, who suspected the secrets that lurked in the heart of the royal family. Once, he had been almost a father to Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, forging alliances and shaping a rebellion to end the reign of the Mad King. Now, it was not a Targaryen threat that gripped his worries, but something far closer to home. The Lannisters, who sat so comfortably in the seat of power at King's Landing. He turned away from the biting winds and stepped back into the solar, nodding to Maester Coleman, who waited in the corner with a worried expression. On a table stood the genealogies Jon had pored over for weeks. He had been discreet, asking quiet questions, digging back into old records of noble houses, old lineages, and rumors. He had visited blacksmiths and stable hands, paid his respects to the children, observed them, especially the golden-haired boy who was crowned prince of the Seven Kingdoms, Joffrey Baratheon. Golden hair, not a hint of the black that should have come from his supposed Baratheon blood. And that was only the start of his suspicions. It was enough. He had compiled every piece of evidence, lined them all up in a way that chilled him. The line of Baratheons all had black hair. The Lannister children, Robert's supposed heirs, did not. It was not just a matter of hair color. It was mannerisms, small details, and the uncanny resemblances to Jaime Lannister. Jon had known Jaime from his foster years in King's Landing, and though Jaime had always been skilled with a blade and carried an easy arrogance, Jon had never suspected him of such a transgression. The thought of it was revolting. Incest between siblings, the Queen and the Kingsguard. If it were exposed, the realm itself would quake. And if it were true, then Robert Baratheon had no trueborn heirs. Jon Arryn exhaled slowly. He needed the truth to come from a place of certainty and careful persuasion. He would not make a pronouncement in King's Landing, not while the Lannisters held such power, and certainly not while the small council included men like Littlefinger and Varys, who both had secrets of their own. No, Jon needed Robert to come to the Vale, to hear these revelations in a place where the Queen's spies did not watch every corner. He needed Ned Stark as well, the man of integrity who had once been fostered here in the Eyrie by Jon's own side. Among the craggy mountains of the Vale, Jon could speak freely, away from prying ears. He had wasted no time in sending discreet ravens to the north and to King's Landing. In them, he wrote that his health was failing, and that he had urgent matters to discuss. He chose his words carefully, ensuring that Robert would think him on his deathbed. Robert would hurry to see his old mentor for perhaps the last time, so Jon hoped. And Ned, well, Ned was bound by duty and by love for the man who had raised him like a second father. He would come. Jon felt a pang of guilt for that small manipulation, but time was short. If he failed to speak the truth soon, everything could unravel. And if he were to mysteriously die, as he believed might already be in the works, who would protect the realm from the Lannisters' ambitions? He spoke to no one of his darkest suspicions. He let Lisa remain in ignorance of the cause for these summons, for he trusted her love but not her subtlety. Their marriage had never been the strongest, and she was prone to flights of fear since her sister Catelyn had wed Ned Stark. Lisa was a Tully, for all that was worth, but she had her own secrets, and Jon could sense her anxieties. He worried about the possibility of her being influenced by others, particularly Peter Baelish, who had grown up with the Tully sisters. No, it was best he keep this secret close to his chest. Days and weeks passed with agonizing slowness. The Vale was quiet under the autumn light, the harvest winding down in the lower slopes, and the first dustings of snow crowning the highest peaks. Jon spent his hours in his chambers reading and rereading the genealogies. The Baratheon lines from Orys Baratheon down to Robert and his brothers Stannis and Renly. All black of hair or dark brown, or occasionally a rich auburn that came from a distant grandmother. But never had there been a blonde Baratheon scion. Never. And he contrasted that with the Lannisters, their proud gold and the unwavering line of children that had rarely strayed from that hallmark coloring. The puzzle was not complicated once seen. It was only hidden because no one dared suspect the queen herself of such betrayal. Maester Coleman told him that a raven arrived from Winterfell. Lord Eddard Stark had set out as soon as he received the summons, braving the King's Road to the Bloody Gate. From King's Landing, word came that Robert would travel in a fortnight, as soon as he resolved urgent issues of state. Jon knew that likely meant Robert would find some excuse to leave behind the burdens of ruling. He always seemed eager to escape the capital. The idea might have delighted him once, to see Robert again and share old stories. Now he felt only a dread heaviness. The revelations he had would shake their friendship and break Robert's heart. Yet there was no other way. When Ned Stark arrived first with a modest retinue of guardsmen from Winterfell, Jon Arryn greeted him privately. Ned had grown older, too, though not as much as Jon would have expected. His gray eyes held the solemn truth of a man who had fought wars, who had carried the burdens of duty for so long. Jon opened his arms to Ned, and the younger man bent the knee in respect before Jon pulled him into an embrace, fatherly in its warmth. "I came as swiftly as I could," Ned said, voice low and reverent. Jon nodded. "I am glad of it. Your presence comforts me." He did not speak of the secret yet. Instead, he said, "How do you fare, my boy? And your family?" Ned's mouth twitched into a small half-smile. "Well enough. Winterfell stands strong. My sons grow taller by the day. Arya runs about as though the winter winds are at her heels, and Sansa has begun to learn the ways of a lady. Robb is nearly a man grown. But I fear for Bran. He climbs too high, though I suspect it's just a boy's fancy." Jon placed a withered hand on Ned's broad shoulder. "Cherish them all. The next generation will be the future of the realm." Ned nodded, glancing about the solar with a hint of confusion. "You summoned me because you are ill," he said. "But you seem hale, only aged. Is there something else that ails you?" "I will speak of it when the king arrives," Jon replied gently. "But I ask that you trust me in this. My health is stable for now, though I do tire easily. There is a matter of grave importance I must share. Until Robert is here, I beg your patience, Ned." He saw questions shining in Ned's eyes, but the Stark was not one to pry. He gave a curt bow of his head in acquiescence. "Very well. I trust you." Then he frowned slightly. "Robert travels with a large retinue, or so I heard, but I also heard the Queen would remain in King's Landing." "Cersei's absence is for the best," Jon said, trying and failing to keep the tension from his voice. "Robert will be freer to act if she is not looming over his shoulder." Ned seemed perplexed but nodded again, a solemn acceptance of the old hand's words. The next several days passed with subdued calm. Jon spent more time with Ned, reacquainting him with the Vale, with the knights, and with little Lord Robert Arryn, who was both sickly and ill-tempered. Ned took the measure of the boy with a gentle courtesy, but Jon could see the sadness in his face. Lisa clung to Ned and asked about Catelyn, about their children. She was more guarded around Jon himself, which he noted with an ache of regret. Whatever love had been between them was overshadowed by a gulf of mistrust and sorrow, and Jon, for his part, did not confide in her. Every day he wore his suspicion like a cloak, worried that if he made one misstep, the news might reach the Queen before Robert arrived. When at last the king's party was spotted winding up the steep trails that led toward the Eyrie, a hush fell over the fortress. Robert Baratheon announced himself in boisterous fashion, horns heralding his arrival. He looked as large and loud as Jon remembered. Age had thickened his waist and lined his face, but he was still broad-shouldered and tall, with a presence that made men bow their heads and women sigh. His black hair had thinned, peppered with gray, but his voice boomed across the courtyard, and a grin lit up his face when he saw Ned and Jon waiting. "Gods, it's cold up here," Robert complained, though he clapped Ned on the back and squeezed Jon's shoulders in warm greeting. "I swore I'd never come back to this damned mountain unless a dire necessity forced me. So which of you forced me?" He let out a hearty laugh, though there was a flicker of concern in his eyes as he regarded Jon's pale visage. Jon managed a weary smile. "You look well, your grace. And you look half a corpse, my old friend," Robert replied bluntly, though he said it not without affection. "Maesters told me you were on your last legs. You better not die until you explain why you summoned me all the way from King's Landing. And alone, at that. The Queen was fit to be tied." Jon inhaled carefully. "We can speak inside. It is a matter only for our ears." Robert allowed himself to be led into the solar with Ned at his side. The solar was not large, and only the three of them stood within. Jon closed the door behind them, giving a nod to the guardsmen to stand outside and let no one in. Ned looked on silently, aware something grave was about to unfold. Robert had the look of a restless bull, wanting to charge but uncertain at whom. Jon cleared his throat and said, "Before anything else, I must ask for your vow, Robert, and yours, Ned, that you will keep what I say here secret until we decide on the best course together. The realm depends on it." Robert looked annoyed, but also uneasy. "Gods, Jon, you have grown paranoid." "I have grown wise to the truths around me," Jon countered calmly. "Please swear it." Ned, ever solemn, bowed his head. "I swear." "You have my word." Robert shrugged. "Have it your way. I swear to keep my mouth shut. Now talk." Jon took a breath, steadying himself. A lifetime of service to the realm, and it all came to this moment. "I have discovered that the children Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are not yours by blood." For the longest moment, Robert simply blinked. Ned inhaled sharply, though Jon guessed that, in his heart, Ned had come to suspect something dire was at play. Robert opened his mouth, closed it, and then barked a laugh. "What foolishness is this?" "Foolishness backed by undeniable evidence," Jon said quietly. He brought forth the records he had compiled. "Look at the line of House Baratheon. Every child born to it with hair black as coal, or at least dark. Yours is a line that does not break so easily. Yet your children with the Queen are all golden-haired, and not simply from the Lannister side. They bear an uncanny resemblance to Jaime." "Jaime?" Robert repeated, his brows knitting. "Jaime Lannister? What are you implying?" Ned took in a sharp breath. "He implies incest." Robert swung his gaze from Jon to Ned, fury threatening to rise in him. "This is madness. Cersei wouldn't—" "Jaime. Gods be damned, you speak of treason." "Yes," Jon said. "It is treason, and we must proceed carefully. But you asked why I summoned you in secrecy. This is the reason. Were I to speak in King's Landing, I would not live to see the morrow. You know the Lannisters. They are not without cunning or means to silence those who threaten them." Robert paced as though a caged animal, fists clenching and unclenching. "If that's the truth, seven hells, Jon. I will have her head and Jaime's. Your rage is justified," Jon replied, "but we mustn't let it consume you. The realm cannot descend into chaos because of your righteous wrath alone. If you move too openly, the Lannisters will sense their danger. We risk war. Tywin Lannister is not a man to be trifled with." Ned nodded in agreement. "A single hasty move and we will be at war with the richest house in the Seven Kingdoms. If they sense you aim to disinherit Joffrey, they will strike first, or slip away, or kill you in your sleep. They have no shortage of gold or cunning." Robert's face was red with anger, tears threatening in his eyes. "If this is true, then all these years my children, my heirs." He shook his head violently. "Those children are not mine." Jon stepped forward. "It is a hard truth, but a truth all the same. You have potential heirs in your brothers, Stannis and Renly. But we must confirm the truth. We must force a confession or gather undeniable proof. It must be done carefully, or the Lannisters will cry slander." "So what am I to do?" Robert growled. "Sit here meekly and wait?" Not meekly, Jon said, but strategically. If you appear in King's Landing with me and Ned at your side and with certain proof, you could quietly confront Jaime and Cersei. Confront them when you have enough allies in place. Men loyal to you and not to them. Men who cannot be bought by gold. You have your Kingsguard, but half of them might be under the sway of the Queen or her father. So you choose the men you trust. You isolate the Queen and her brother, demand the truth, and if they resist, then justice must be served. Ned added in a quiet but firm tone, all while ensuring the realm remains at peace. I know you do not love politics, Robert, but your role is crucial. You must gather your strength, remain calm. Any rash action could plunge the Seven Kingdoms back into war. Robert said nothing for a long while. Jon could feel the anguish radiating off him like heat from a smithy. He recalled the boy Robert had been joyful, impulsive, with a thirst for life and laughter. Now that boy was gone, replaced by a king who had been tricked by those he should have been able to trust above all others. At last, Robert sank onto a chair, pressing his hands over his face. "Everything about my marriage," he muttered, voice muffled. "It was all a sham." Jon approached slowly. "I am sorry, my king. I would spare you this pain if I could." Robert looked up then, eyes burning with anger and heartbreak. "Where do we begin?" Ned stepped forward, kneeling, speaking gently. "First, we gather allies. Men like my brother Benjen in the Night's Watch are beyond such games, but men like my bannermen in the north are honorable. The Vale is likewise, thanks to Lord Arryn. The Riverlands may side with the Tullis if they trust you still. The Tyrells might remain aloof or might see an advantage. You'll want to keep Stannis close. He is dutiful even if not beloved. Renly is more charismatic but less reliable. We must prepare carefully before we name this conspiracy." Jon nodded. "We must also consider how we present the children. They are innocent of this sin, even if born of incest. Will you have them executed or exiled, or will you keep them at court as wards? The realm will look to you. This matter is about more than your personal wrath." Robert's face twisted. "I know, but damn it, I can't see straight right now. I want their heads on spikes. And yet, Myrcella is just a little girl. Tommen he's but a boy. Joffrey is cruel, but still he's what, 12? 12 or 13, Ned corrected. A boy, yet old enough for a streak of cruelty. But it might be best to consider them as children who should not bear the brunt of adult sins." He paused, then added carefully, "Although Joffrey's nature may require special handling." Robert let out a shuddering breath. "Let me think on it. I won't kill them out of hand, but I might not be able to bear the sight of them. You speak truly, though. We must keep the realm from tearing itself apart. So let us plan. But if that vile brother of hers tries to cross me..." Jon nodded. "Then we shall see justice done." In the days that followed, the tension within the Eyrie was palpable. The stark truth of the Lannister children weighed heavily on Robert. He drank more than usual, though it did not bring him the carefree laughter it once had. He drank to forget, to stave off the bitterness that threatened to consume him. Ned tried to steady him, reminding him of duty, of the people, of the alliances that needed to be forged. Jon guided them through the genealogies, the quiet letters that would be sent to certain lords whose loyalty was firm. Lisa hovered nervously, demanding to know why the king was in her home and what was being planned. Jon kept his answers vague. She was furious with him, pacing the corridors in a swirl of anxieties. She sought comfort in her son, Robert Arryn, who was still but a child of 6, small and sickly. The boy liked to cling to his mother, and whenever King Robert stumbled past in a half-drunken haze, the child wailed in terror at the large man's booming voice. King Robert, for his part, was ill at ease around the pale child who shared only his name. At last, Robert declared that he had spent too long away from King's Landing, that matters of state demanded his presence, and that if he lingered too long, Cersei would suspect something. He needed to return, to pretend that all was as normal as could be. Jon agreed. "We will follow shortly," he said. "Ned and I will tie up loose ends here in the Vale. Then we will come to King's Landing and resume our roles at your side." Ned frowned. "If you go alone, how can you protect yourself from the Lannisters?" "I am the damned king," Robert said bitterly. "I can handle myself. I will not move openly until you and Jon arrive. Then we will confront them carefully with a plan. Meanwhile, I'll make sure to keep Jaime at arm's length. Cersei suspects nothing, I think. She'd have tried to stop me from coming if she did." Jon touched the younger man's arm. "Be vigilant. The queen is cunning." Robert gave a mirthless grin. "Aye, she is, but my eyes are open now. Thank you, Jon, for that." The king departed with a fraction of the retinue he arrived with, citing a need for speed on the return journey. Jon and Ned watched him go from a high balcony, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Once, seeing Robert ride away had always stirred a sense of pride in Jon's chest, watching the boy he had fostered become a man. Now he only felt dread for the trials that lay ahead. Ned said quietly, "I should follow close. I don't like leaving him alone with his anger." Jon nodded. "Yes, but give him a few days' lead. We want to avoid suspicion. Then we ride for King's Landing. I will go as well. I do not like to leave the Vale in Lysa's hands, but there is no choice. The realm is at stake." So that was the plan. Jon had expected to begin the journey a week later, but the night before his departure, something happened that nearly put an end to everything. He woke in the darkness of his chambers, coughing violently, his throat aflame. His body was gripped by tremors, sweat pouring from his brow, though the night air in the Eyrie was cold. Summoning what strength he had, he called for Maester Coleman, gasping for water. The pain in his chest was like knives. Coleman hurried in, his face grim, bringing milk of the poppy and fresh water. Jon could barely swallow, convinced in his feverish state that he had been poisoned. It made sense. If someone suspected he knew too much, they would try to silence him before he could leave the Vale. Lysa rushed in, disheveled, tears streaking her face. "Husband, what is this? Why are you so ill?" Jon tried to read her expression, searching for guilt or fear, but all he saw was terror. Still, a shadow of doubt gnawed at him. He could not speak, only wheeze. Maester Coleman tried various remedies, from herbal concoctions to potions that smelled of mint and bitter roots. Ned arrived, too, and for hours they hovered, uncertain if Jon would live to see the dawn. But he did. By the time the first pale light of morning crept through the windows, the fever had broken. Jon coughed less, though he was weak as a newborn. He drank fresh water, trying to keep his eyes open. Ned watched him, relief etched in every line of his face. "It was close," he murmured. "You're stronger than you appear, old friend." Jon nodded, speaking in a raspy whisper. "I must go to King's Landing. We cannot delay." He tried to rise from the bed, but Ned gently pushed him back. "You need time to recover," Ned insisted, but Jon's eyes burned with determination. "No, this is what they want, to weaken me. Time grows short. If Robert stands alone too long, anything could happen. He might crack under the pressure. We must leave within a day or two at most." Lysa wrung her hands, tears shimmering. "You'll die on the road if you press on, husband. I will die if I remain." "It makes no difference," Jon said harshly. "At least let me do my duty. Let me see the realm set to rights before I pass." Faced with that steel in Jon's gaze, Ned had no choice but to relent. "Very well, but you will rest for another day at least. Then we ride, at the slowest pace you can manage." Jon agreed. He was exhausted. He spent the next day in a haze, half lying on his bed. Lysa hovered, pouring out her anguish in anxious complaints, but Jon was too weary to comfort her. He mulled instead on who might have tried to poison him. Had it truly been Lysa, as some in King's Landing had hinted after the fact? He had heard rumors that she was manipulated by Peter Baelish. Or perhaps it was someone else in the Eyrie, bribed by Lannister gold. He could not be sure. His heart ached at the suspicion, but he resolved not to confront Lysa yet. Not until he had the strength to do so. 2 days later, he was clothed and mounted on a horse, albeit with help from Ned's men. They set forth from the Arryn, descending the treacherous mountain trails, passing the gates of the moon and heading for the high road out of the Vale. Their journey was slow, made slower by Jon's fragile health, but the old man refused to turn back. Ned rode at his side, silent and steadfast. The knights of the Vale who accompanied them offered their support as well, respecting Jon as their lord. Lisa remained behind with her son, clasping her hands in farewell, though Jon thought he saw a strange glint in her eyes as they parted. He left with a heavy heart, uncertain if he would see the Vale or his wife again. The road south seemed longer than Jon remembered. Winter was creeping ever closer, and the nights were cold and crisp. Jon rested in the evenings, though his cough was slow to fade. They encountered few travelers, mostly merchants hurrying to King's Landing before snows blocked the roads. Ned tried to lighten the mood, telling Jon small stories of his children's antics. Jon listened with half a smile, reminded of simpler times when Ned had been just a boy with a direwolf's puppish loyalty. But the weight of their mission pressed on them. Letters had been sent ahead to men like Stannis Baratheon, urging him to be in King's Landing when Jon arrived. Yet they had to be cautious with the content of their messages, for fear that the Queen's spies would intercept them. The letters only hinted that the king needed him, that it was a matter of succession and family, that the realm was in peril. If Stannis followed the call, as was his duty, he would be in the capital. Jon had also reached out to Renly, though he was less certain Renly would take the matter as seriously. As they neared the Crownlands, word reached them that King Robert had returned in a foul mood but had done nothing overt against the Lannisters. It seemed to Jon that Robert was biding his time, though each day might tear at the king's soul. Jon prayed that Robert would not do anything rash. Ned frowned and said little, but Jon could see the tension in the younger man's jaw. They were heading into the lion's den. No matter how carefully they moved, a single misstep could see them undone. When they reached the city gates of King's Landing at last, the smells and sights of the capital washed over them. To Jon, the city felt more claustrophobic than ever. Twisting streets choked with people, a million eyes that might belong to enemies, and the Red Keep towering above it all like a fortress of secrets. They rode in quietly, not with the pomp that might normally greet the hand of the king. Jon did not want to announce to all of King's Landing that he was back. Instead, he sent a messenger ahead to the Red Keep to inform Robert of his arrival, then steered his horse toward the compound set aside for high lords near the keep. They dismounted in a small courtyard. Immediately, they were greeted by Ser Barristan Selmy, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who bowed respectfully to Ned and Jon. Ser Barristan looked relieved to see them. "Lord Arryn, Lord Stark, the king is expecting you." Jon nodded, leaning on Ned for support as he dismounted. His breath rattled, and his bones ached, but he forced himself to stand tall. "I am sorry we are delayed." Ser Barristan shook his head. "I fear the king needs you more than ever. His temper has been volatile. He spent the last weeks in the barracks, sparring or drowning himself in drink. The queen remains in her chambers, seldom seen." Jon exchanged a glance with Ned. "Has there been any sign that she suspects?" Barristan's face was composed, but a flicker of concern passed over it. "She knows something troubles the king, but I do not believe she knows the cause. At least not entirely." Then, in a quieter tone, "Be careful, my lords. These walls have ears." Ned offered a curt nod, and together they entered the keep. Jon found the familiar halls unchanged, though it had been some time since he last walked them. The decorations, the red carpets, the gold and crimson tapestries of House Targaryen replaced by the stag and lion of King Robert and his queen. He felt the weight of history pressing down, and with it the knowledge that he was about to rewrite a great deal of the future. They reached the king's private solar and found Robert Baratheon pacing there, a half-empty flagon of wine on the table. He wore a loose-fitting tunic, the laces undone at the neck, exposing a bit of his broad chest. His hair was uncombed, his eyes red from drink or lack of sleep. Yet when he saw Jon and Ned enter, he straightened, though not before a flash of something like desperation crossed his face. 7 hells, it's about time, Robert muttered, though his voice held less anger than relief. Close the door. Ned shut it gently. Jon eased himself into a chair. The journey had exhausted him. Your Grace, I apologize for the delay. Robert waved a dismissive hand, then turned away to pour wine into 3 goblets. How is your health? Jon coughed lightly. Manageable. Good, good. Robert offered them each a cup, though Ned accepted only a small portion. Jon waved it away, preferring water. Robert downed half of his own in a single gulp. If you had died, he said, I wouldn't know what to do. Jon's eyes flicked to Ned. We are here now, Ned said calmly. We must set our plan in motion, or the Queen will grow suspicious. Have you spoken of the matter to anyone? Robert sank into a chair, setting aside the wine with a trembling hand. No one but you two. I've tried to act normal. I forced myself to bed her once or twice, just so she wouldn't suspect. It made my skin crawl. Jon grimaced. We must act soon, then. The longer we wait, the more risk. Robert nodded, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Stannis arrived yesterday. He's lurking in the castle, furious as always. Renly's here as well, though he prances about with Loras Tyrell and attends feasts. My council is divided. Baelish is sly, Varys cryptic. Pycelle is as useless as ever. Ser Barristan suspects that I keep some secret, but he respects my privacy. As for Jaime, he struts around, though he keeps his distance from me. Cersei, she watches. She's no fool. Jon took a breath. We must gather a small group of men we trust beyond doubt. Ser Barristan is one. Perhaps Ser Jorah Mormont if he can be found, though I hear rumors he has gone east. We need the Kingsguard members who are not beholden to the Lannisters. Lord Stark's men from the north can be stationed in the Red Keep. I can call upon the Knights of the Vale who are loyal to me. Ned frowned. That might appear suspicious, but done subtly it could be arranged. My family's retinue can stay at an estate outside the city, close enough to be called upon. Robert nodded, glancing between them. Then we confront them, Cersei, Jaime. We force a confession, or we produce the lineages as evidence. Then what? That is for you to decide, Your Grace, Jon said quietly, though his tone carried weight. We suggest justice, but also caution. The children are not at fault. Let them live, but remove them from the line of succession. That means you will name Stannis as heir, or perhaps Renly if you prefer. But it should be Stannis, as the elder and more dutiful brother. Robert scowled. Stannis, he's like iron, always cold. But damn it, he's honest. Yes, I'll make him heir. Then we must handle Tywin Lannister. He will rage. Jon nodded. He might. But with the crown, the north, the Vale, the Stormlands, possibly the Reach if Renly can sway Mace Tyrell, Tywin will find himself outnumbered. The cunning old lion might try to negotiate. He will not risk everything in open war if he knows he cannot win. And if he does? Robert challenged, eyes glinting. Ned said quietly, then we face war. But with the realm united, it will be a swift one, and Tywin knows it. Robert exhaled, scrubbing a hand through his hair. Let us hope it does not come to that. Very well, we'll begin. Tomorrow, we quietly place our trusted men in positions within the Red Keep. Then, come nightfall, we call on the Queen. Jaime might be with her, or we might need to arrest him separately. We place them under guard, and the moment they protest, we reveal the proof. Let them see there is no escape. Then we'll let them speak or die. Jon raised a cautioning hand. They might try to kill themselves or each other, anything to keep the secret. We must be prepared. The king's eyes were stone-hard. We will be. Ned and Jon departed the Solar, leaving Robert to wrestle with his anguish alone. Outside, Ned let out a slow breath. We are on the brink of something that could shatter the realm, or save it. Jon walked slowly, leaning on Ned's arm. We can only do what is right. The rest is in the hands of the gods. They spent the rest of the day securing allies. Ned went to speak with some of his own men who had arrived earlier at Jon's behest. stationing a select few within the Red Keep as an honor guard for Lord Stark. Jon summoned his old friend Ser Vardis Egen from the Vale, quietly sending him instructions to bring a few loyal knights into the keep on the pretense of protecting the hand. Ser Barristan was informed that some members of the Kingsguard might be compromised, and while the old knight looked distressed by the implication, he did not protest. He knew the Queen's siblings were powerful. They did not want too large a force inside the keep, for that would arouse suspicion. Instead, the men were spread out, disguised as servants or lesser guards, waiting for the signal. In the city, they had small pockets of men loyal to Ned or the Vale who could converge on the Red Keep if needed. It was an elaborate dance of subterfuge. Jon felt the strain on his health with every passing hour, but he refused to yield. If his body failed him now, the realm would be left to the vultures. On the appointed night, Jon and Ned joined Robert in a small antechamber near the royal apartments. Stannis was there as well, tight-lipped and grim. Ser Barristan stood with them, sword at his side, face drawn. Renly had been alerted but was uncertain if he wished to join openly in the confrontation. Robert had allowed it, suspecting Renly preferred to watch from a safer remove. In the corridor outside, a handful of men from the north and the Vale waited, armed but inconspicuous. Robert inhaled deeply. "We will go to her chambers. Barristan, you secure Jaime. Bring him to us once we have the Queen contained." Barristan gave a stiff bow. "Yes, your grace." Ned exchanged a glance with Jon, who tried to straighten his spine. "We are with you, Robert." The king nodded once, then stepped out into the corridor, leading them toward the Queen's chambers. The guards posted at the door blinked to see the king arrive with such company at this hour. Robert waved them aside with a snarl. They dared not protest. The door was pushed open, revealing the Queen's sumptuous apartments lit by a dozen candles. A brazier smoldered in the corner, warding off the night's chill. Cersei Lannister stood by a table, dressed in a loose robe of green velvet embroidered with gold. Her hair, golden as all Lannisters, fell around her shoulders in thick waves. She looked up, surprise flitting over her features at the sight of her husband and the others. "Robert," she said, forcing a smile, "what is the meaning of this visit?" Robert closed the door behind them with a heavy hand. "We need to talk, Cersei." Her emerald eyes flicked to Ned Stark, then to Jon Arryn, who coughed, leaning on his staff. She saw Stannis lurking near the back, arms crossed, face like granite. Tension crackled in the air. "Such grim company," she drawled. "Has the council decided on another war?" "Yes," Robert said flatly. "If you force one upon us." A flicker of uncertainty touched her gaze. Still, she raised her chin with regal defiance. "What nonsense is this?" Jon Arryn cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Your Grace, or rather Lady Cersei, the truth is known." He held up a small book of lineages, though he did not expect her to be swayed by genealogies alone. "We know your children are not the king's. We know you have lain with your brother Jaime." For an instant, her face was blank. Then color flooded her cheeks, turning them red. The flame of the braziers seemed to dance in her eyes. "How dare you speak such vile accusations? Robert, are you going to let your pet, this old man, insult your wife so?" Robert advanced a step and she shrank back slightly. "You are no wife of mine," Robert said, voice shaking with anger. "You have deceived me for years. You think I'm blind? I've seen the truth in Joffrey's eyes, in Tommen's, in Myrcella's. None of them have a drop of Baratheon blood." She drew herself up, though fear lingered beneath her defiance. "You only see what you want to see, and even if these children aren't yours, you have no proof of—" "Silence!" Robert roared, spittle flying from his lips. "You will confess or you will die here and now." She stared at him, heart pounding, a cornered lioness. The flicker of cunning lit her gaze. "Kill me, and half the realm rises against you." Stannis stepped forward. "Half? That is an overestimation. Did you think House Lannister's gold could buy an army large enough to defeat the entire realm united under the true king?" Ned Comer said, Think carefully, my lady. The king offers you a chance to confess. The children can be spared. If you resist, you will only invite destruction upon your house." A tremor moved through her. Jon could see the indecision warring with pride. She parted her lips, eyes darting around the room. "My father will not stand for this insult," she hissed. "He will burn you all." "Let him try," Robert growled. Just then, the door burst open, and Jaime Lannister strode in, sword drawn, eyes blazing. Two of Robert's men toppled behind him, moaning in pain. Jaime moved with the deadly grace of a Kingsguard knight. He had not even bothered with a cloak. He wore breeches and a loose white tunic, chest partly bared, hair in disarray. His sword gleamed in the candlelight. "Get away from my sister," he snarled. "What is this?" Ser Barristan followed right behind him, sword also drawn. "Stand down, Ser Jaime." Jaime's eyes flicked to Barristan, then to Robert. "I'll stand down when I know what the hell is going on." Cersei seized the moment, turning her eyes to Jaime. "They know," she spat. "They claim the children are. You dare speak it here?" Robert spat. "Traitorous scum." Jaime's grip tightened on his sword. The tension was a tangible thing. Jon felt his heart pound in his ears. If Jaime attacked now, blood would be spilled. Robert had a hand on his warhammer, though it was not unslung yet. Ned's sword was half drawn. Stannis had a dagger at his belt, and Barristan stood ready. "Jaime," Cersei said, voice cracking for the first time, "we need to leave. Now." Jaime hesitated, glancing at the steel arrayed against them. Yet the raw, protective fury in his eyes was undeniable. "We'll not be taken like rats," he said softly, threat clear in every syllable. Robert bared his teeth. "Try to fight, you golden bastard. I'll crush you into pulp." "Please," Jon said, forcing his voice to carry though his throat burned. "No more bloodshed. Ser Jaime, the truth is plain. Confess it or you will die. We have men throughout the keep." Jaime's nostrils flared. "You think I'll kneel to you?" Cersei's eyes darted to the door behind her that led to her private chambers. She might have a secret passage or escape route in mind, but Robert blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. Then Barristan, with the calm authority of the Kingsguard's Lord Commander, spoke up. "Ser Jaime, please, listen to reason. If you attack, you will be labeled a traitor and executed. The children, they need not pay for your sins. Surrender." Jaime's sword wavered. He looked at his sister, a silent communion passing between them. Cersei's eyes were wide, shining with hatred and fear. In that moment, Jon saw how deeply the two twins were entwined, how they had lived their entire lives bound by a toxic love. Jaime's face contorted with fury and heartbreak. He might have lunged, Jon expected it, but something in the air shifted. Perhaps Jaime realized that he was outnumbered, that there was no escape for both of them if they drew steel. Or perhaps the memory of Targaryen madness, and what it had done to the realm, made him hesitate to unleash more chaos. He let out a bitter laugh, dropping the tip of his sword to the floor. "Well, isn't this a fine piece of hypocrisy?" he said. "You took your throne by force, Robert. You killed the rightful heirs." "Enough!" Robert roared. Jaime sneered, but he let the sword slip from his grip, clattering on the stone floor. "My life for the children," he said to Robert. "That is my offer." Cersei let out a gasp. "Jaime, no." Jaime ignored her, raising his hands. "I'll confess if it pleases you. Yes, the children are mine. All of them. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. They are the product of our love or our sin. Call it what you like." Robert strode forward and backhanded Jaime across the jaw with a savage blow. Jaime staggered but did not fall. Blood trickled from his split lip. "You vile son of a bitch!" Robert snarled, raising his fist again. Ned stepped in, catching Robert's arm. "Don't kill him here," Ned said quietly. "We must think of the realm." Breathing hard, Robert lowered his fist. "Seize them," he ordered Stannis and Barristan. "Separate them at once. Guard them." Throw Jaime in the black cells if you must, and lock Cersei in her chambers under watch. If they try anything, kill them." Barristan and Stannis nodded. Stannis advanced on Jaime and roughly gripped his arm, while Barristan ordered the other men in. The guards rushed in, taking Jaime's sword. Jaime did not resist, though he glared daggers at them. Cersei shrank back, face twisted with hate and desperation, as more guards filed in to bind her wrists. She spewed curses at Robert, calling him a usurper, calling Ned a traitor, calling Jon a meddling old fool. Jon stood fast, ignoring the barbs. It was done. The fateful confrontation had ended not in bloodshed but in captivity. The Queen and her brother were arrested. The shockwaves of that act would shake the entire realm, no doubt. Tywin Lannister would not take it lightly, but for now the city was calm, the king in control. Robert turned to Jon, face pale, chest heaving. "What next?" he asked, the question carrying all the weight of a realm in turmoil. Jon swallowed hard. He could still taste bile from the tension. "Now, Your Grace, we keep the peace. We guard the children. We show the realm that the crown is stable, that you remain king. And when the time is right, we reveal the truth, carefully, so that House Lannister cannot twist it." Robert shut his eyes. "The children, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, they are not mine. I don't know how to look at them now. Gods have mercy." Ned placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Show them mercy, and the realm will see that you are a just king. The blame falls on Cersei and Jaime." Robert's face worked in silent conflict. Then he turned away, grunting. "Lock them in their chambers. Double the guard. I want no one near them until I decide their fate." Jon stepped forward, though every bone in his body ached. "We have prevented immediate bloodshed. Let us hope we can prevent war as well." That night, word spread like wildfire through the Red Keep that the king had discovered a terrible betrayal by the queen, though the exact details were kept under wraps. Courtiers whispered in corridors, servants cast wide-eyed glances, and tensions ran high. But Robert's show of strength, his armed men at every key post, his public stance that the traitors were under arrest, kept outright panic at bay. The small council convened in emergency session. Pycelle blustered, Littlefinger raised an eyebrow in mocking surprise, and Varys gave his trademark murmur of concern. None openly challenged the king's authority, though all it would take was a single letter flying to Lord Tywin in the night to incite a crisis. Days stretched on. Robert sequestered himself with Jon, Ned, and Stannis, deciding how to present the scandal to the lords of the Seven Kingdoms. Some argued that Cersei should be executed quickly, or forced to take the black, but that was complicated by Jaime's confession and the fate of their children. Others suggested the children be named bastards, stripped of titles, and sent to separate keeps as wards. Robert raged and brooded, pacing in the shadows, but Jon pressed for clemency where possible. "The realm will judge you on how you handle the innocents," he said softly. "And though Joffrey is old enough to be shaped by his mother's cruelty, Myrcella and Tommen are still gentle. You can treat them kindly, if not as your own." Robert's fists clenched. "I can't bear to see them. They are living reminders of my humiliation." Ned tried to reason with him. "Then keep them far away. Send them to foster somewhere safe, perhaps with a loyal bannerman or a distant relation." In the end, they crafted a plan. Joffrey would be disinherited, stripped of the name Baratheon, and forced to enter the faith's service. If he showed any sign of cruelty or refused, he might be imprisoned. Myrcella and Tommen would be wards of the crown, fostered by other noble families who were not allies of the Lannisters, perhaps the Tullys or the Arryns. Robert's heartbreak manifested in a desire never to see them again, but Jon hoped that over time, with the realm stabilized, a more balanced approach would emerge. As for Cersei and Jaime, they remained in the dungeons pending a formal trial. Jaime's status as Kingsguard complicated the matter. It was the gravest sin for a knight sworn to protect the king to cuckold him. Stannis spoke of a Kingsguard's oath, of the old ways demanding death. Yet Robert occasionally looked pained, almost remembering the camaraderie of youth. Jon pressed that the trial must be carried out with fairness, lest it look like a personal vendetta. That would come soon enough. Once lords from across the realm were summoned to witness the charges. The question was how Tywin Lannister would respond. The letters had been sent, calling for him to come to King's Landing to answer for his family's crimes. The realm held its breath. Yet, as the weeks passed, it seemed that the seeds of a second rebellion did not immediately blossom. Lord Tywin, rumor said, was livid, but he did not march his armies. He was too clever to plunge into a war he might lose, especially with most of the great houses, from the north to the Stormlands to the Vale, uniting around the king. So he sent cautious replies that he would come to King's Landing to speak with the king. The stage was set for a negotiated settlement, though tension simmered behind every corner. And so, for the first time in months, Jon Arryn felt that the realm might be spared another devastating conflict. The War of the Five Kings, which might have ignited had Robert died or had the secret been revealed in a more chaotic manner, was averted, or at least postponed. With the truth exposed before an irreparable fracture could form, with both Ned Stark and Jon Arryn alive to steady Robert's hand, the Seven Kingdoms found itself on a different path than the one fate had written in blood. Jon walked one evening along the walls of the Red Keep, looking out over the city. His cough remained, his bones still ached, and he knew his time in this world would not be long. Yet the wind off Blackwater Bay smelled of possibility. He thought of the lines of succession, of Stannis being named heir, of how the realm might not love Stannis but might at least be served by his unyielding honesty. He thought of the Targaryens across the narrow sea, rumored to be stirring with illusions of reclaiming the Iron Throne, but for now overshadowed by the drama in Westeros itself. Lord Arryn, Ned's quiet voice made Jon turn. The younger man stood behind him, cloak fluttering in the breeze. The king asks for you. Jon nodded, letting Ned help him walk the rest of the way. He felt old and tired, but he also felt a strange sense of peace. Perhaps they had done enough. Perhaps the realm would stand, stronger than before, because the truth, however bitter, had come to light in time to prevent the storm of civil war. The night sky gleamed with stars above King's Landing, and as Jon descended the steps, he murmured a quiet prayer that the realm would know peace, true peace, if only for a little while. The future would bring its own threats, from within and without, but at least this one war, the war that might have been sparked by secrets and lies, had been smothered before it could rage across the Seven Kingdoms. And that, Jon thought wearily, was worth all the effort of living this long and bearing the burden of the truth. He pressed on, leaning on Ned, determined to guide the realm a little further yet, until his final breath left him, and trusting that, after, there would be men of honor to carry on the watch and keep the flame of stability alive in the realm he had served for so many decades. For now, at least, the war was prevented, and the Seven Kingdoms would have a chance to heal from its hidden wounds. All because Jon Arryn had lived long enough to reveal the secrets that would have otherwise drowned Westeros in blood.